John Chambers, the former CEO of Cisco Systems, said in an interview recently, the one thing that I wish I had hammered home even more, even for myself, was that this year is when agility is a must. Now, he wasn't talking about gymnastics. I don't know, John, maybe you're a gymnast, maybe you were. But he's talking about, of course, AI, artificial intelligence. And of course, it's the thing on everybody's lips, everybody's minds, everybody's phones, everybody's laptops, especially if you're a white-collar worker, because they're the people that it seems like it's going to affect the most. Now, that word agility comes back in cycles every now and again. And it first reared its head probably in around about the early 2000s, but then really came to the fore, if I'm remembering rightly, between 2012, 2016. What AI requires is both technical and emotional agility. But if history's taught us one thing, it's that we'll very much focus on the technical agility and not enough on the emotional agility. Let's take the agile movement as an example. Right now, if you don't know anything about the agile movement, prior to the 1990s, software development was really heavyweight. This is the birth of the agile movement. There was lots of what we call a work breakdown structure. If you've ever worked on a project with a project schedule, it's got like 1 million tasks on, you'll know what I mean, these waterfall processes. Lots of heavy documentation, everything had to be written down. And there wasn't really much thought, time and effort put into building teams and value in humans. So in February 2001, 17 software developers got together at the Snowbird ski resort in Utah, and they discussed kind of the lightweight methods, a lightweight approach to doing software development. But really what they were looking for is to find common ground. What had they seen? What approaches had they taken? And actually, in their opinion, given that they were experts in the field, what would work when it actually comes to developing software in the right way? And the product of that meeting was what became known as the Agile Manifesto, which I think was published in February 2001. And essentially, it was 4 values and 12 principles. And what they called for in the manifesto was better culture and better practices around the way that software was developed or that work was done. All right, I'm going to come back to this shortly. Software was developed and the way that work was done. And it was the 4 values that really stood out for me. These were the things that they said, these are the things that we should value the most when it comes to doing this work. And it was individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So what they said is like, listen, the business of developing anything is very much a human endeavor. And what we recognize is the importance of that individual knowledge and then how we come together, work together in order to pool that knowledge. The second one was working software over comprehensive documentation. So our job is to produce something. It might not be perfect, but produce something. Then we can build and iterate and change and build and iterate and change over writing everything down in a big thick manual. That was the second value. The third value was customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So again, the emphasis is on let's work with our customers to understand what their needs are, rather than let's write everything in a requirements document, get them to sign it, knowing full well that it will change tomorrow. And then the last one was responding to change over following a plan. And the inference here is, let's create the mechanism whereby it's easy for us to respond so we're not completely overwhelmed by task after task after task after task. We have got the time to be more flexible. And so you can start to see with those 4 values, really this is how you bring the principles of being more agile in the way that you work and more flexible. So that was 2001. You fast forward to 2010, well, agile really started to become adopted. And from memory, as someone who was head of projects at that time, it was really about 2010, 11, 12, where it really it properly exploded in popularity. And the way people are talking about AI now was the way people were talking about agile then. It was seen as this great silver bullet. CEOs talked about the fact they were going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars and projects were going to get done quicker and budgets would be slashed and they wouldn't need as many people and all of these things. If you were around then, you completely understand, recognize that. However, and again, you'll recognize some of that with AI. However, by 2016, you had signatories of the original manifesto, so people like Martin Fowler, Dave Thomas. I actually heard a speech from Martin Fowler in Melbourne in 2015 or 16 where he talked about this. And they were expressing concern that the agile values as they'd written down weren't actually being followed. They weren't actually seeing better culture around the way that software developed and work got done, which is what the principles and the values are all about. Instead, what they were seeing was the commoditization of this thing that became agile. So you had the proliferation of different methods. And they said they were actually building rigidity into the system. So the kind of principles of being agile and flexible were being destroyed by these complex methods. And, they called for a change and they said, this is not what we said at all. And in the meantime, consulting and training companies made hay rolling out these programs, and companies sent everyone on an agile training program. And the actual thing that they were calling for was a change in culture. So the principles of agile and how you value them were all about human interaction. It was less about process, it was more about human interaction. It was less about tools and it was more about how do we work together to do stuff. It was more about how do we work with our customers rather than how do we write it all down and sign it in a contract. And so what you had there was technical agility. We built a technical solution, a system to implement agile. And of course, most people, it's not everybody, some people, really succeed in agile. They kind of eventually figured it out that actually it's a huge change in culture. And what we need is a different way of thinking, a different mindset, a different set of behaviors. And so to AI, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Colin, this has been the longest introduction to AI. You said you were going to talk about AI. You haven't done any of that. We're 7.5 minutes in. What are you doing, man? Because consulting companies and training companies now are right at the start, and you'll see it more and more and more, of rolling out training programs on how to implement AI. And some of them will have merit. If you're having a training program to show people how to get the value out of Copilot or Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it is, there's value in that because people generally don't know how to use tools. That's why digital transformation projects fail, because people don't know how to use the tools, and the culture never changes. You change the culture first before you implement the tool. Same with AI. So most people's organization is seeing AI as a bit of a failure right now because the culture hasn't changed. The values are still the same as they were prior to implementing AI. Well, how can they be? This is a fundamental shift in the way that we work. And of course, we're still in the experimental phase. I wrote a blog recently talking about AI being still in the propaganda phase. It is. The tech companies promised us one thing. We haven't quite realized it, but we'll get there. And so you'll see this proliferation of tools and programs, and consulting companies will sell you a kind of perfectly packaged, here's what you do to implement AI. This is how you're going to get the value out of AI, when what's actually required to get the most out of AI is emotional agility. Yes, a little bit of technical agility. You have to figure out how it interfaces with everything else. But actually what's required is emotional agility. And that's a change in behavior, and that's a change in culture. And what we need to see, if you're to get the value out of it, is an increase in emotional intelligence, that thing that we've downplayed for so long. And it's definitely going to happen. PwC did in their global CEO survey, I think it was at the end of last year, found that 7 out of 10 CEOs believe that AI will significantly change the way that the company creates, delivers, and captures information. But only if people know how to use the tool, and then only if they've got the behaviors such that they can not only leverage the tool, but actually think about, well, what is it that we need to do in order to get the value from this? Many experts have already said that emotional intelligence will be the key differentiator, and that humans with high EQ will be the ones that thrive in the AI age. So let's just talk very, very briefly about emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence? Well, it's the capacity to be aware of how you feel, understand yourself, your personality, your responses, recognize your emotion, and then be able to control it. And when you have these skills, then you're able to build relationships in an empathetic and judicious way. And that's what it means to be emotionally intelligent. And of course, self-aware individuals are the foundation for all great teams, and it's no different when you're using artificial intelligence. And it's important to remember that artificial intelligence will be able to imitate or recognize human emotion, but they can't feel or understand them. Empathy is always going to be very, very difficult for a machine to do. So this is why we need people with high EQ to really think about, well, how do I need to change and how do I need to stay relevant in the AI age? And emotional intelligence really is, it's just like a muscle. And like any muscle, it just needs to be exercised and strengthened and worked out. And anybody can be emotionally intelligent, anybody. We all have the ability to be emotionally intelligent. It's just some people just never really take the time to understand what it takes and then to actually practice it and do it. So I thought I would give you five, we're right at the start of AI implementation. And I did a speech recently on building an AI-ready culture. And of course, I talked a lot about vibrancy. I talked a lot about making sure that we understand the technology. I talked a lot about, for CEOs, it's about creating extra value, not about ridding yourself of the cost, especially in the early days. And there's always a bit of me that dies inside when I hear a CEO say, we're going to be able to save so much money. How about you create more value instead? That surely would be a better place to start. You simply don't know what the technology is capable of at this point in time. So 5 key behaviors. And the first one, as you would expect, is curious. The behavior of questioning what AI is, the question, how it works, explore its capabilities, explore its limitations. In the blog that I wrote recently, I talked about both of these things, its capabilities and its limitations. And what you don't want is just to passively accept this is the way that we do things now. Oh, we've rolled out ChatGPT, we want you to start using it. Right? And it's not that we want you to push back and say, no, absolutely not. We want you to be curious and say, well, why? What's the value that we're looking to derive from this? I had a skeptical person message me recently and said, surely if I feed AI all my information, it will eventually learn my job. Yeah, probably will eventually. But, it's up to you to think about and be curious about, well, how can I use it such that it benefits me as a human being? So curious is the first behavior. The second behavior is adaptable. And so this is where we start to see that kind of flexibility, that agility to come in. And adaptable is just a similar word, a synonym for both of those words. And that's about adjusting to different methods, processes, approaches, which AI may change. And again, this is where, and that's why I started with curious, because what you want is that relentless curiosity all the way through. Why would we change this? What's the value? Almost like the 5 whys. Also, as they release different models within AI, you're going to get different capabilities, you're going to get different functionality. What you can't afford to do is try and maintain the status quo, particularly when it comes to processes and practices. And then introduce AI on top of that. It's just not going to work. In the same way that digital transformation projects, it didn't work that way either. You've really got to think about how do we change the culture such that we better embed AI into the way that we do things. The third behavior is collaborative, because without working together on this stuff, you're just going to be sailing individual ships over the horizon and never the twain shall meet. Not only that, it's about being collaborative with the AI systems as well. And this is where understanding what are the right prompts, what are the right questions, what are the right things to say. And then any insights that you get from that is to share them. That's the business of being collaborative. Actually, if you come up with a really great set of prompts and say, listen, this is the way to prompt AI to get the answer that you're looking for, share it. Share it with other people. Don't hoard it. Don't keep it to yourself. And again, within our culture, what we want is to see that collaboration. And the next behavior then is trust. And this is about trusting the fact that firstly, the technology will get better. It's a bit rubbish at the minute. I don't feel like AI is really learning anything about me at the minute. I use it predominantly for research, but it still gives me answers in American English, even though I'm British, even though I ask it in British English. It still has a Z for organisation and realise and all this kind of stuff. Also, it still hallucinates. It still just makes stuff up randomly, and I'm like, really? And then when you query it, it's like, oh, you're absolutely right. I got that wrong. It's like, well, why? But I'm placing my trust in it. I'm a positive skeptic at this point. I trust that it will get better and it will improve, and there will be mistakes and there will be failures and there will be all of these things, but it's part of the learning process. It really is part of really understanding, well, it will get better, and you just have to have your trust and your faith in it. If you just give up and throw your hands up in the air, then you'll end up really feeling down about the whole thing. It will get you down. You won't see how it benefits you. You won't see how it will benefit the organisation. And consequently, you'll just get more and more frustrated all of the time. And then the last point, and this one is the last behaviour, and this is especially important if you're a manager, is empathy. Because there's going to be a lot of fear around AI. And your job is not to say to people, well, it's coming, whether you like it or not, we're going to implement it, it's coming. And it's to actually hold court, talk about these things, recognise that people are genuinely fearful. It will transform many organisations, not immediately, but it will transform. And so that's where the curiosity comes in, the adaptability, but also having empathy for each other. We're already seeing a massive reduction in graduate recruitment already. And if the statistics are to be believed, they're looking at 300 million jobs. And of course, there'll be new ones created. But actually, maybe there won't. Maybe there won't be 300 million jobs created. So having that empathy for others as you go through this, recognising that there will be a lot of fear, there will be a lot of frustration. I think that will benefit you all too. So just a reminder, the future of work really isn't about kind of humans versus machines. It sounds like Terminator now, doesn't it? Completely turned it into the Terminator script. It's about humans and AI working together, but also you guys actually doing this together and working together and seeing that the future of work is going to change, and you staying the same, unfortunately, isn't possible. And I'm not asking you to change your values and who you are as a person, but becoming more emotionally intelligent, really thinking about those 5 behaviours and demonstrating them will just, ensure that you remain relevant, valuable, and fulfilled in your professional life. Hope you enjoyed today's session.